Days passed, and the device continued to hum softly on the kitchen table, its blinking lights growing more erratic with each passing hour. Daniel and Laura kept watch around the clock, their nerves stretched thin as they waited for a signal that would lead them to Ryan, or the swarm. The tension in the house was palpable, broken only by brief moments of quiet conversation or restless pacing. Finally, late one night, the device emitted a sharp, high-pitched tone. Its lights flared brightly, and a series of coordinates appeared on a small screen embedded in its surface. Daniel stared at it, his heart pounding. "This is it," he said quietly, his voice heavy with both determination and dread. "It's leading us to their base." Laura stood beside him, her face pale but resolute. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "What if it's a trap?" "It's probably a trap," Daniel admitted, gripping the edge of the table. "But we don't have a choice. If we don't stop them now, they'll keep coming after us. And after everyone else." Together, they gathered their supplies, flashlights, makeshift weapons, and anything else they thought might help. Daniel carried the alien device carefully, its faint glow guiding them like a beacon. They loaded everything into the car and set off into the night, the road ahead shrouded in darkness and uncertainty. The coordinates led them deep into the forest, far from any signs of civilization. As they drove, the air grew colder, and an eerie stillness settled over the trees. When they finally reached the location, they found themselves standing before a massive structure hidden beneath layers of camouflage netting. It looked like a fortress, alien and impenetrable. "This is it," Daniel whispered, his breath visible in the frosty air. "Their base." Laura nodded, clutching a metal pipe tightly in her hands. "Let's end this." They approached cautiously, staying low to avoid detection. The entrance was guarded by drones, their red eyes scanning the area methodically. Daniel used his glowing fingertips to disable two of them silently, melting their circuits with precise bursts of energy. Laura followed close behind, ready to strike if anything went wrong. Inside, the corridors were dimly lit, lined with strange symbols and humming machinery. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and something metallic. They moved quickly, following the device's signal deeper into the complex. Along the way, they encountered more drones, but Daniel and Laura fought side by side, their movements becoming instinctive as they worked together. Finally, they reached a large chamber at the heart of the base. In the center stood Ryan, his glowing eyes fixed on them with cold amusement. Behind him loomed a towering machine, pulsing with energy and surrounded by alien figures cloaked in shimmering armor. "You shouldn't have come here," Ryan said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You can't win." "We're not leaving without stopping you," Daniel replied, stepping forward. His hands glowed brighter than ever, his body trembling with the effort of channeling so much power. "If I go down, I'm taking you with me." Ryan smirked, raising his hand. But before he could act, Laura lunged at him, striking him hard with her weapon. Caught off guard, Ryan stumbled, giving Daniel the opening he needed. With a roar, Daniel unleashed a surge of energy, targeting the machine. Sparks flew as the device began to overload, shaking violently. "Get out of here," Daniel shouted to Laura, his voice strained. He stayed behind, holding the aliens at bay while she fled toward the exit. As the base collapsed around him, Daniel made one final sacrifice, ensuring the aliens' plans were destroyed. Outside, Laura watched in horror as the structure exploded, tears streaming down her face. But then, amidst the smoke and debris, a figure emerged. Daniel, battered but alive. Together, they limped away from the wreckage, vowing to rebuild their lives and protect Earth from whatever threats remained. Back at the house, Daniel collapsed onto the couch, his body aching from the fight in the tunnels. Laura brought him a glass of water, her hand still trembling slightly from the adrenaline that hadn't yet faded. The quiet of their home felt strange after the chaos they had just endured, almost too calm to be real. "We bought ourselves some time," Daniel said finally, breaking the silence. His voice was low and weary, but there was a note of resolve in it. "But Ryan won't stay gone for long. And the aliens, they'll come for me again." Laura sat down beside him, her expression determined despite the fear lingering in her eyes. "Then we prepare," she said firmly. "We can't just sit here and wait for them to find us." Daniel nodded slowly, his mind racing. He knew she was right. They couldn't afford to be passive. If they were going to survive, they needed a plan. But how could they possibly stand against an enemy as powerful and relentless as the swarm? The thought weighed heavily on him, but he pushed it aside. For now, all they could do was take one step at a time. "We need to figure out where Ryan went," he said after a moment. "He's their connection to me, to hybrids like us. If we can track him, maybe we can find their base." "But how?" Laura asked, frowning. "He's not exactly going to leave a trail for us to follow." Daniel hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device he had salvaged from the machine before it exploded. It was scorched and damaged, but parts of it still glowed faintly with residual energy. "This might help," he said, holding it up. "It's part of their technology. If I can repair it, I might be able to use it to locate Ryan, or at least trace the signal he's using to communicate with the swarm." Laura studied the device, her brow furrowed. "Do you even know how to fix something like that?" "I'll figure it out," Daniel replied, though there was uncertainty in his voice. "I've worked with alien tech before. It's risky, but it's our best shot." For the rest of the night, they set to work. Daniel spread tools and wires across the kitchen table, carefully examining the damaged device. Laura stayed by his side, handing him whatever he needed and keeping watch through the windows. Every creak of the house made her jump, her nerves stretched taut with the fear of another attack. As dawn broke, Daniel finally leaned back in his chair, exhaustion etched across his face. The device now hummed softly, its lights blinking steadily. "It's working," he said quietly, relief mingling with apprehension in his tone. "At least I think it is." "What does it do?" Laura asked, leaning closer to inspect it. "It's picking up signals, alien frequencies," Daniel explained. "If Ryan's nearby, or if the swarm sends more drones, this should alert us. And maybe it can lead us to their base." Laura nodded, though her stomach churned at the thought of what they might find. "So what's the next step?" "We wait," Daniel said grimly. "And when it gives us a location, we move. We'll need weapons, supplies, anything we can use to defend ourselves. And then," Laura pressed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then we finish this," Daniel replied, his jaw tightening. "Whatever happens, I won't let them hurt you, or anyone else. If they want me, they'll have to go through me first." Laura reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "You're not doing this alone," she said firmly. "I'm with you, no matter what." Daniel managed a small smile, grateful for her strength. But deep down, he knew the road ahead would be dangerous, deadlier than anything they had faced so far. The aliens wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted, and Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that the final confrontation was drawing near. As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting golden light through the windows, they prepared for the fight of their lives. The device sat on the table between them, its steady hum a reminder of the storm brewing just beyond the horizon. Whatever came next, they would face it together. But neither could ignore the gnawing fear that victory might come at a price neither of them was ready to pay. The chamber erupted into chaos as Daniel's energy blast struck Ryan, sending him stumbling backward. The glow from Daniel's hands illuminated the room in flashes of bright light, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Laura ducked behind a nearby pillar, clutching her flashlight like a weapon. Her heart raced as she watched the two men clash. Daniel fighting with raw determination, and Ryan moving with unnatural speed and precision. "You think you can stop them?" Ryan sneered, recovering quickly from the attack. His eyes glowed brighter now, almost pulsing with power. "You're just a failed experiment, Daniel. The aliens don't need you. They have me." Daniel ignored the taunt, focusing instead on the machine at the center of the room. If he could disable it, he might be able to cut off whatever connection the aliens were using to track him. But Ryan wasn't about to let that happen. With a flick of his wrist, he sent a surge of energy toward Daniel, forcing him to dive out of the way. "Stay back," Daniel shouted to Laura, his voice strained. He didn't want her getting caught in the crossfire, but she refused to stay idle. Peering around the edge of the pillar, she spotted a length of broken pipe lying on the ground. Grabbing it, she crept closer to the fight, looking for an opening. Ryan advanced on Daniel, his movements fluid and predatory. "You don't understand, do you?" he said, his tone mocking. "This isn't just about you. The swarm needs hybrids like us to unlock their true potential. Your energy, it's the key to powering their weapons. Without it, they'll destroy this planet piece by piece until they get what they want." Daniel gritted his teeth, his mind racing. He couldn't let Ryan win, not when so much was at stake. Summoning another burst of energy, he unleashed it directly at the machine, hoping to overload its systems. Sparks flew as the device sputtered, its lights flickering erratically. "No," Ryan roared, lunging toward the machine to protect it. For a split second, his attention shifted away from Daniel. And that was all Laura needed. With a cry, she swung the pipe as hard as she could, striking Ryan squarely in the side. The impact sent him sprawling to the ground, momentarily stunned. "Daniel, now," she yelled, tossing the pipe aside. Seizing the opportunity, Daniel sprinted toward the machine, his hands glowing brighter than ever. Placing both palms against its surface, he channeled every ounce of energy he had left into one final surge. The machine shuddered violently, its hum rising to a deafening pitch before exploding in a shower of sparks and smoke. The force of the blast knocked everyone off their feet. Laura hit the ground hard, her ears ringing from the noise. When the dust settled, she scrambled to her knees, searching for Daniel through the haze. She found him lying a few feet away, dazed but alive. Ryan, however, was nowhere to be seen. The explosion had apparently thrown him clear across the chamber, leaving only scorch marks where he had stood moments before. Did we stop him?" Laura asked, her voice shaky as she helped Daniel sit up. "For now," Daniel replied, wincing as he rubbed his temples. "But this isn't over. Ryan's still out there, and the aliens will send more drones, or worse." Laura nodded grimly, helping him to his feet. "Then we keep fighting," she said firmly, "whatever it takes." As they made their way back to the tunnel entrance, the weight of what they had done, and what still lay ahead, pressed heavily on them. They had destroyed the machine, but the battle was far from won. Somewhere out there, Ryan and the swarm were regrouping, planning their next move. And Daniel knew that sooner or later they would come for him again, with everything they had. The next evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Daniel and Laura stood at the edge of the woods, staring at the entrance to the underground tunnels. It was little more than a rusted metal hatch half buried in leaves and dirt, its surface corroded with age. The map had led them here, but standing before it now, the reality of what they were about to do hit them both like a cold wind. "Are you sure this is the right spot?" Laura asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She clutched the flashlight tightly in one hand, her knuckles white from the grip. "It matches the map," Daniel replied, though his tone carried a hint of uncertainty. He crouched down, brushing away the debris covering the hatch. Only one way to find out. With a grunt of effort, he pried the hatch open, revealing a dark staircase spiraling downward into the earth. The air that wafted up was damp and stale, carrying the faint smell of mold and something metallic. Laura shivered, pulling her jacket tighter around herself. "Let's go," Daniel said, taking the first step. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing walls lined with crumbling concrete and exposed rebar. Laura followed close behind, her footsteps echoing softly against the narrow passage. As they descended deeper, the temperature dropped noticeably. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the sound of their breathing and the occasional drip of water somewhere far off. Laura glanced over her shoulder frequently, half expecting to see glowing eyes or hear the telltale buzz of drones behind them. But so far, the tunnel remained empty. After several minutes of walking, they reached a fork in the path. One branch sloped sharply downward, while the other stretched straight ahead. Daniel consulted the map again, frowning as he tried to match the markings to their surroundings. "This way," he said finally, pointing to the straight path. They continued onward, their flashlights casting long shadows on the walls. Every few steps, Laura noticed strange symbols etched into the concrete, shapes that looked alien, almost like writing. She didn't ask what they meant. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. Eventually, they came to a large chamber. The space was dominated by a massive machine in the center, its surface covered in blinking lights and wires that snaked across the floor like veins. The hum of electricity filled the air, low and constant. Laura stared at the device, her stomach twisting with unease. "What is that thing?" she whispered. "It looks like some kind of generator," Daniel replied, approaching cautiously. He ran his fingers along the edge of the machine, his brow furrowed in thought. "If I'm right, it could be powering whatever the aliens are using to track me." Before Laura could respond, a voice echoed through the chamber, startling them both. "I wouldn't touch that if I were you." They spun around to see a figure stepping out of the shadows. It was a man, or at least it resembled one. His face was gaunt, his skin pale and stretched too tightly over his bones. His eyes glowed faintly, an unnatural light that made Laura's breath catch in her throat. "Ryan," Daniel said, his voice hardening. "I thought you were dead." Ryan smirked, tilting his head slightly. "Not quite," he replied, his voice smooth and chilling. "Though I suppose you could say I've changed, thanks to our mutual friends." Laura stepped closer to Daniel, her heart pounding. "You're working with them," she accused, her voice trembling despite her attempt to sound brave. Ryan chuckled, a sound devoid of warmth. "Working asterisk for asterisk them, you mean? They'd promised me power, immortality. All I had to do was help them finish what we started all those years ago." His gaze shifted to Daniel, his smile widening. "And now, they've sent me to bring you home." Daniel clenched his fists, his glowing fingertips betraying his anger. "I'm not going anywhere with you." Ryan shrugged, seemingly unconcerned. "That's fine. You'll come willingly or not. It makes no difference to me." With that, he raised his hand, and the hum of the machine grew louder, vibrating through the chamber. Laura grabbed Daniel's arm, panic rising in her chest. "We need to get out of here," she urged. But Daniel shook his head, his jaw tightening. "Not yet," he said grimly. "First, we shut this thing down." As Ryan lunged toward them, Daniel unleashed a burst of energy, illuminating the chamber in a blinding flash. The fight had begun, and neither side was willing to back down. Back at the house, Daniel and Laura spread the documents they had salvaged from the lab across the kitchen table. The dim light of the overhead lamp cast long shadows over the papers, making the words seem heavier than they already were. Laura flipped through the journal, her brow furrowed as she tried to piece together its cryptic entries. Each page was filled with frantic scribbles, half-formed thoughts, and warnings scrawled in the margins. "This Ryan guy," Laura said, breaking the silence. "He knew something big was coming. Look at this." She pointed to a passage near the end of the journal. "He talks about the swarm, a group of aliens working with advanced technology. He says they're planning something massive, but he never explains what." Daniel leaned closer, his eyes scanning the text. "The swarm," he repeated quietly, his voice tinged with dread. "That's what they called the drones we saw tonight. They weren't just random machines. They were part of a larger force." Laura nodded, her fingers tracing the edges of the journal. "And here, he mentioned someone named Kale. Do you know who that is?" Daniel shook his head, though the name sent a chill down his spine. "No, but it sounds like one of them. Maybe their leader. If Ryan was working with them, he might have been reporting directly to Kale. Laura closed the journal, her hands trembling slightly. Do you think Ryan's still alive? What if he's helping them find us? It's possible, Daniel admitted, rubbing his temples. If he betrayed the project years ago, he's probably been feeding them information ever since. And now that they know I'm here. He trailed off, his voice heavy with unspoken fears. Laura reached out, placing a hand on his arm. We'll figure this out, she said firmly. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. Daniel managed a small smile, grateful for her unwavering support. But even as he nodded, his mind raced with questions. How much did the aliens know about him? Had Ryan told them everything? And most importantly, how could they stop an enemy so far beyond human understanding? As they continued sorting through the documents, Laura found a folded map tucked inside one of the folders. Unfolding it carefully, she realized it depicted a series of underground tunnels leading away from the lab. What's this? She asked, holding it up for Daniel to see. His eyes widened as he studied the map. Escape routes, he said slowly. They must have built these in case something went wrong during the experiments. If the aliens are using the lab as a base, these tunnels could be our way in or out. Could we use them to track Ryan? Laura suggested, her voice tinged with cautious hope. If he's working with them, maybe he's hiding somewhere down there. It's risky, Daniel replied, frowning. But it might be our only chance to find him and stop whatever plan they're putting into motion. They spent the next hour poring over the map, marking potential entry points and exits. The tunnel stretched deep beneath Willow Creek, branching off in multiple directions. Some led to abandoned bunkers, while others terminated abruptly, suggesting cave-ins or deliberate blockades. We'll need supplies, Daniel said finally, standing up and stretching his stiff muscles. Flashlights, food, anything we might need if we get trapped down there. And weapons, Laura added, her tone firm. Those drones won't hesitate to attack again. We can't go in unprepared. Daniel nodded, heading toward the garage to gather tools and equipment. As he worked, Laura sat back at the table, staring at the map. A thought gnawed at her, one she couldn't quite shake. What if Ryan wasn't just working with the aliens? What if he was one of them now? Changed, like Daniel, but loyal only to their cause. She pushed the idea aside, focusing instead on the task ahead. They would enter the tunnels tomorrow night, armed and ready. For now, all they could do was rest and prepare. But as Laura turned off the kitchen light and climbed into bed beside Daniel, sleep eluded her. The image of the alien's glowing eyes lingered in her mind, haunting her dreams and reminding her of the danger waiting just beneath their feet. The buzzing noise grew louder, filling the air with an eerie hum that made Laura's skin crawl. Daniel grabbed her arm, pulling her behind a large metal table as the sound became almost deafening. His heart raced as he peered cautiously around the edge of their makeshift hiding spot. Shadows moved across the doorway, distorted and unnatural. Whatever was coming, it wasn't human. Stay low, Daniel whispered, his voice urgent but calm. Don't make a sound. Laura nodded, clutching the journal tightly to her chest. Her breath came in shallow gasps, and she forced herself to focus on staying quiet. The room felt colder now, as though the temperature had dropped suddenly. She glanced at Daniel, whose glowing fingertips were beginning to light up faintly, betraying his tension. Through the darkness, strange figures entered the lab. They weren't like the alien Laura had encountered in the woods. These beings were smaller, mechanical, and moved with jerky, unnatural motions. Their bodies were sleek and metallic, resembling drones more than living creatures. Each one had a single red eye that scanned the room methodically, searching for something or someone. They're looking for us, Daniel murmured under his breath. Probably tracking my energy signature. What do we do? Laura asked, her voice barely audible. Can you fight them? I can try, Daniel replied, his jaw tightening. But there are too many. If I use my powers, It'll just draw more attention. We need to get out of here without being seen." As if on cue, one of the drones turned its head sharply in their direction. Its red eye flickered, locking onto their position. Before Daniel could react, it emitted a high-pitched whine, alerting the others. Within seconds, all the drones were converging on their location. "Now," Daniel hissed, grabbing Laura's hand. He yanked her to her feet, pulling her toward the far side of the lab where a narrow corridor led deeper into the building. The drones followed, their mechanical legs clanking loudly against the concrete floor. They ran as fast as they could, dodging fallen debris and shattered glass. Laura stumbled once but caught herself before Daniel had to stop. Behind them, the buzzing grew closer, relentless. The corridor ended in a dead-end room, filled with old computer terminals and dusty monitors. Trapped, they turned to face the advancing drones. "We have no choice," Daniel said grimly. "Get behind me." Laura obeyed, watching as Daniel raised his hands. His fingers glowed brighter this time, pulsing with energy. With a deep breath, he released a burst of light that shot outward like a wave, striking the first drone and sending it crashing to the ground. Sparks flew as the machine short-circuited, its red eye dimming instantly. The other drones hesitated, their movements faltering momentarily. But then they surged forward again, undeterred by the loss of one of their own. Daniel unleashed another wave of energy, taking down 2 more drones, but the effort left him visibly drained. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and his hands trembled as he prepared for another attack. "We can't keep this up," Laura said anxiously, scanning the room for anything they could use as a weapon. Her eyes landed on a heavy metal pipe lying near her feet. Grabbing it, she swung at the nearest drone, striking it hard enough to knock it off balance. It teetered for a moment before collapsing in a heap of wires and metal. Daniel gave her a quick nod of approval before focusing on the remaining drones. Together, they fought back to back, using whatever means they could to hold off the relentless machines. One by one, the drones fell, until only silence remained in the room. Breathing heavily, Daniel leaned against the wall, exhaustion etched across his face. "That was close," he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. "Too close," Laura agreed, lowering the pipe. Her arms ached, but adrenaline kept her moving. "Do you think there are more of them out there?" "Probably," Daniel admitted, straightening up. "But we've bought ourselves some time. Let's grab what we can and get out of here before reinforcements arrive." Laura quickly scooped up the journal and shoved it into her bag, while Daniel gathered a few loose papers from the floor. As they hurried back through the lab, the oppressive atmosphere seemed even heavier than before. Every shadow felt like a potential threat, every sound a warning. When they finally reached the car, Laura practically collapsed into the passenger seat, her legs shaking from the ordeal. Daniel slid behind the wheel, starting the engine with trembling hands. Neither of them spoke as they sped away from the lab, leaving the drones, and whatever else might have been lurking inside, far behind. For now, they were safe, but both knew this was only the beginning. "It's mostly technical stuff," Daniel replied, skimming the documents. "Details about the experiments, data on the subjects. Wait." He paused, his eyes narrowing as he read a particular entry. "This is it. This explains why the aliens are interested in me." Laura leaned closer, trying to make sense of the jargon-filled text. "What is it?" "They weren't just experimenting on us," Daniel explained, his voice low and urgent. "They were trying to create hybrids, beings with both human and alien DNA, beings like me. And according to this, hybrids have something the aliens need." "Something they need," Laura repeated, frowning. "What kind of thing?" "Energy," Daniel said grimly. "Apparently, our bodies produce a unique form of energy that the aliens can use to power their technology, or maybe even weapons. That's why they've come back. They want to harvest it." Laura's stomach churned at the thought. "So they're not just after you because of the experiment. They're after you because of what you can give them." "Exactly," Daniel confirmed. closing the folder. And if they succeed, it won't just affect me. It could put everyone on Earth in danger. The gravity of the situation settled over them like a suffocating blanket. Laura swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay calm. "Then we need to stop them," she said firmly. "But how? We don't even know where they are." "We'll figure it out," Daniel promised, though doubt lingered in his voice. "First, we need to gather more information. There might be other records here, something that tells us how to fight back." As they continued searching the lab, Laura noticed something odd tucked beneath a pile of debris. It was a journal, its leather cover cracked and worn. Curious, she picked it up and began flipping through the pages. The handwriting was shaky, almost frantic, but readable. "Daniel," she whispered, holding up the journal. "Look at this. It's someone's personal notes from the project." Daniel took the book from her, scanning the entries. His expression darkened as he read. "This belonged to Ryan Cole," he muttered. "He was one of the other subjects. I thought he disappeared after the accident, but, according to this, he didn't leave willingly." "What do you mean?" Laura asked, her pulse quickening. "He betrayed the project," Daniel said, his voice tinged with anger. "He gave the aliens access to our research, and if he's still working with them—" He trailed off, his jaw tightening. "We're in more trouble than I thought." Before Laura could respond, a sound echoed through the lab, a faint buzzing noise, growing louder by the second. Daniel froze, his eyes darting toward the doorway. "We're not alone," he whispered. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and darkness crept over Willow Creek, Daniel and Laura drove in silence toward the abandoned laboratory. The car's headlights cut through the dense forest, illuminating twisted branches that seemed to reach out like skeletal fingers. Laura stared out the window, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She tried to focus on the road ahead, but her mind kept replaying the events of the past 24 hours. It was hard to believe how quickly her ordinary life had been turned upside down. Daniel gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. He hadn't been back to the lab since the accident, hadn't wanted to face the memories it held. But now, with the aliens closing in and questions mounting, he had no choice. If there were answers to be found, they would be there, buried among the ruins of his past. When they arrived, the building loomed before them, a crumbling structure surrounded by overgrown weeds and rusted fences. The windows were shattered, and graffiti covered the walls, evidence of teenagers using the place as a hangout. Despite its decrepit appearance, the air around it felt heavy, almost oppressive, as though the building itself was holding its breath. "This is it," Daniel said quietly, turning off the engine. "Stay close to me." Laura nodded, grabbing a flashlight from the glove compartment. As they stepped out of the car, the night air was cold and damp, carrying the faint smell of earth and decay. They approached the entrance cautiously, their footsteps crunching on broken glass and gravel. The door hung crookedly on its hinges, creaking loudly as Daniel pushed it open. Inside, the lab was a shadowy maze of overturned tables, scattered papers, and broken equipment. Dust coated every surface, thick enough to make Laura sneeze. Daniel moved with purpose, his eyes scanning the room for anything familiar. Memories flooded back as he recognized pieces of machinery he hadn't seen in years, machines that had once hummed with power, but now sat silent and useless. "Over here," he called softly, leading Laura to a corner of the lab where file cabinets lined the wall. Most of the drawers were empty or jammed shut, but after some effort, he managed to pry one open. Inside were folders marked with faded labels. Asterisk Project Genesis Asterisk. Asterisk Hybrid Trials Asterisk. Asterisk Subject D7 Asterisk. His hands trembled as he flipped through the pages, searching for clues. "What does it say?" Laura asked, peering over his shoulder. The next morning, Laura woke up feeling like she had been caught in a strange dream. But as sunlight streamed through the curtains, and she saw Daniel sitting at the kitchen table, his face pale and drawn, she knew it wasn't a dream at all. Everything he had told her last night, The glowing fingers, the aliens, the experiments, was real. She felt a knot tighten in her stomach as she realized their lives would never be the same. Daniel glanced up as she entered the room, offering her a weak smile. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his voice soft and careful, as though afraid of saying the wrong thing. Laura hesitated before answering. Her chest still hurt from the alien's attack, but the pain wasn't just physical. It was deeper, harder to explain. "I don't know," she admitted finally, pulling out a chair and sitting across from him. "I feel confused, scared, like none of this can possibly be real." Daniel nodded slowly, his hands wrapped tightly around a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. "I get it," he said. "I've had years to try to make sense of it, and even now I don't have all the answers." Laura stared at him for a moment, studying his face. Despite everything, he still looked like the man she had married. The man who made her laugh, who held her when she cried, who always seemed so steady and dependable. But now, there was something else beneath the surface, something she couldn't quite put into words. It wasn't just the glowing fingertips or the alien DNA. It was the weight of the secrets he had carried for so long. "Why did they come after me?" she asked suddenly, breaking the silence. "If they're really after you, why attack me?" Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples as if trying to ease a headache. "I think they were testing you," he said grimly. "Maybe they wanted to see how strong your connection is to me, or if you pose any kind of threat. Aliens like them. They don't trust anyone. They analyze, experiment, and eliminate anything that stands in their way." Laura shivered at his words, the image of the alien's cold, unblinking eyes flashing in her mind. "So what do we do now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How do we fight something like that?" "We don't fight them directly," Daniel replied firmly. "Not yet. First, we need to understand why they're here, and why they targeted us specifically. There has to be a reason, and I think the answer lies in my past." He stood up abruptly, pacing the length of the small kitchen. "When the accident happened, I wasn't the only one affected. There were others involved in the project, people who might know more about what's going on. If we can find them, maybe they can help us figure out what these aliens want." Laura frowned, leaning forward in her chair. "Do you really think they'll talk to you? After all this time?" Daniel stopped pacing and turned to face her, his expression grim. "I don't know. Some of them disappeared after the project shut down. Others, well, let's just say not everyone handled it the same way I did. But it's our best shot." Laura nodded slowly, determination beginning to replace her fear. "Then we'll find them," she said, surprising even herself with how steady her voice sounded. "Together." Daniel smiled faintly, gratitude flickering in his eyes. "You don't have to do this, Laura. You've already been through enough because of me." "Yes, I do," she insisted, standing up to meet his gaze. "This isn't just your fight anymore. It's mine too. Whatever happens next, we face it together." For the first time since the alien attack, Daniel felt a glimmer of hope. He reached out and took Laura's hand, squeezing it gently. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for staying, for believing in me." "I'm not going anywhere," Laura replied, her voice firm. "But we need a plan. Where do we start?" Daniel thought for a moment, then grabbed a pen and paper from the counter. "There's an old lab outside of town where the experiments took place. It's abandoned now, but if we're lucky, we might find records or clues about what the aliens are planning. We'll go there tonight." As they began making preparations, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into something far bigger than either of them could imagine. But one thing was certain. No matter what dangers lay ahead, she wouldn't let Daniel face them alone. Laura opened her eyes slowly, the world around her still blurry and distant. Her head throbbed with a dull ache, and her body felt heavy, as though she had been running for hours without rest. She blinked a few times, trying to focus on the familiar shapes of her living room, the soft glow of the lamp, the worn couch beneath her, and Daniel sitting nearby, his face etched with worry. "Are you okay?" Daniel asked softly, leaning closer. His voice was gentle, but there was an edge to it that Laura couldn't quite place. She nodded weakly, though she wasn't sure if she believed herself. "What happened?" she murmured, her own voice barely above a whisper. Daniel hesitated, his hands tightening slightly on the edge of the coffee table. He wanted to tell her everything, to explain the truth about who he really was and why that alien had attacked her. But where could he even begin? How could he make her understand something so impossible? "You were hit by something," he said finally, choosing his words carefully. "I saw it from the house. I ran out as soon as I realized what was happening." Laura frowned, her brow furrowing in confusion. "That thing. It looked like it wasn't from here." She paused, searching Daniel's face for answers. "Do you think it was an alien?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy and unspoken. Daniel swallowed hard, his mind racing. He knew he couldn't lie to her, not completely, but revealing the full truth felt like opening a door he might never be able to close again. Still, he owed her something. She deserved to know at least part of the story. "I don't know what it was," he said slowly, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. "But whatever it wasn't natural. And it wasn't random. That thing came here for a reason." Laura sat up a little straighter, wincing as pain shot through her chest. "For me?" she asked, incredulous. "Why would it come after me? I'm nobody special." Daniel shook his head, his jaw tightening. "Not you," he said quietly. "It came for us. For our family." His words sent a chill down Laura's spine. "What do you mean, us?" she pressed, her voice rising slightly. "Daniel, you're scaring me." He sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. For a moment, he looked away, staring at the floor as if gathering his thoughts. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and hesitant. "There are things about me, Laura, things I've never told anyone. Not because I didn't trust you, but because I was afraid. Afraid of what people might think. Afraid of what they might do." Laura stared at him, her heart pounding. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "Just tell me, Daniel." He took a deep breath, steeling himself. Then, slowly, he extended his hand toward the lamp on the table. At first, nothing happened. But then, a faint glow began to emanate from his fingertips, soft and otherworldly. Laura gasped, her eyes widening in shock. The light grew brighter, illuminating Daniel's face in an eerie, unnatural way. What is that?" she stammered, pulling back instinctively. "It's part of me," Daniel admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "Years ago, I was involved in an experiment, a secret government project. Something went wrong. And, well, let's just say I'm not entirely human anymore." Laura's mind reeled, struggling to process what she was seeing and hearing. You're saying you're an alien," she managed, her voice barely audible. "No," Daniel replied quickly. "I'm still me. But I'm different. I have abilities now, things I can't fully explain. And those aliens, the ones you saw tonight, they're the same species that changed me. They've been watching me, waiting. And now, they've found us." The room fell silent, the weight of his confession settling over them like a thick fog. Laura didn't know whether to scream, cry, or run. Instead, she sat frozen, staring at the man she thought she knew. The man she loved. Was he still the same person, or was he something else entirely? Finally, she found her voice. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked, her tone a mix of hurt and anger. "I wanted to protect you," Daniel said earnestly. "I didn't want you to live in fear, knowing what I am. But now they've put you in danger too. And I swear, Laura, I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe." For a long moment, Laura said nothing. She looked at Daniel, really looked at him, and saw the same man she had always known, kind, brave, and fiercely protective. Whatever he had become, he was still her husband. And if the aliens wanted him, they would have to go through her first. In the small, peaceful town of Willow Creek, Laura Bennett enjoyed her daily routine. Every evening, she went for a jog along the tree-lined paths near her home. The air was crisp, and the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink as it began to set. It was her favorite time of day, a moment to clear her mind after work and soak in the beauty of nature. On this particular evening, however, something unusual caught her attention. As she rounded a bend in the trail, a strange light appeared in the sky. At first, she thought it might be a plane or a satellite, but it moved too quickly and erratically for that. The light grew brighter, almost blinding, and seemed to descend toward the forest. Curiosity tugged at her, and despite a nagging feeling of unease, she decided to investigate. Laura slowed her pace and stepped off the path, pushing through bushes and low-hanging branches. Her heart raced, not from exertion, but from anticipation. She had always been fascinated by stories of UFO sightings, though she never imagined she would encounter anything like it herself. As she approached the source of the light, she froze. Standing before her was a creature unlike anything she had ever seen. The being stood taller than a human, its body shimmering with what looked like liquid metal. Its large, oval-shaped eyes glowed faintly, scanning her with an intensity that made her feel exposed. Laura's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to run, but her legs felt rooted to the spot. The alien raised one elongated arm, pointing it directly at her. Before she could react, a beam of energy shot out, striking her chest. Pain surged through her body, sharp and searing, and then everything went dark. When she came to, she found herself lying on the cold ground, her head throbbing. Confused and disoriented, she tried to sit up, only to realize the alien was gone. The forest was silent except for the rustling leaves overhead. Shaking, Laura stumbled back onto the trail, unsure if what she had experienced was real or just some bizarre hallucination. Unbeknownst to her, someone had witnessed the entire scene. From the window of their modest home, perched on a hill overlooking the woods, Daniel Bennett watched as the alien attacked his wife. His hands clenched into fists as he gritted his teeth, torn between rushing to help and staying hidden. He knew exactly what that creature was, and more importantly, he understood why it had come. Years ago, Daniel had been part of a top-secret government experiment. An accident during the project left him forever changed, fusing his DNA with that of an extraterrestrial species. Since then, he had lived in constant fear of discovery, hiding his abilities even from those closest to him. But now, seeing Laura targeted by the same kind of beings he had spent years avoiding, he realized his secret life was no longer safe. As Laura staggered closer to the house, Daniel sprang into action. He hurried outside, pretending to have just noticed her distress. "Laura," he called out, his voice filled with concern. She turned toward him, pale and trembling, and collapsed into his arms. Daniel held her tightly, his mind racing. Whatever the aliens wanted, they weren't going to stop until they got it. And if they discovered who, or rather, what asterisk he truly was, things would only get worse. For now, though, all he could do was take care of Laura, carrying her inside. He laid her gently on the couch and covered her with a blanket. He studied her face, guilt gnawing at him. How could he explain this to her? More importantly, how could he keep her safe when the danger came not just from outside, but from within himself?